Okay, so welcome everybody to our Wednesday, September 10th Insights. This week we're going to be going through meaningful use and really dissecting what's in the final rule. We're going to start off talking about some of the basics, talk a little bit about the difference between Medicaid and Medicare because that causes quite a bit of confusion, and then we'll actually drill down into, based on where each provider is in the attestation time frame, what you should be thinking about for meaningful use. There is a lot of stuff in the final rule, and a lot of the nuance of it is pretty tough to generalize on. So I'll definitely do my best during this presentation. However, that being said, I'll go ahead and open it up, and we should have a significant amount of time for Q&A today if you'd like it. And then you're also welcome to email me if you'd like, and I can go ahead and give you some suggestions specific to your scenario. So as many of you are aware, back in late, I believe it was June of this year, CMS went ahead and put out a proposed rule for extending meaningful use stage 2 and giving people an out that would typically be having to do meaningful use stage 2 this year. That did become a final rule here in September with some additional explanations and caveats on it. However, there are quite a bit of items that are purposefully left ambiguous by CMS, and we'll talk about those as we get into it. But just by way of background, and again, this is going to be a review in the beginning for a lot of folks, but meaningful use is run by CMS, so Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. I do get asked questions sometimes, well, what if I don't see any Medicare patients, or what if my Medicaid population is too low? Am I not eligible then for meaningful use? Let's say a PEDS practice in a fairly affluent area that just doesn't have a large Medicaid population. And that is true, you would not be eligible for meaningful use in that situation. It really is intended to be rewarding for those providers that participate in Medicare and Medicaid services. And then you do need to go ahead and use a certified EHR, use it in a meaningful manner, and that's kind of a funny term as we've learned because it's what CMS determines as a meaningful manner. Exchange clinical information and then submit clinical quality measures, which is, that last bullet is especially important. So as I'm sure you're all aware, there's 3 stages for meaningful use. Stage 1 was really focused on data capture and sharing, so that was simply just entering some pieces of information into the EHR, being able to show that you could generate a report off that information, and very basic functionality. The second stage is moving on to advanced clinical processes, and the second stage is really focused on using clinical decision support at point of care, as well as expanding out CPOE and really ratcheting up the amount of interaction that the physicians themselves have to have with the EHR. And then finally, stage 3, which is still up in the air, is supposed to be around improved outcomes. As most folks again are aware, there's the 3 stages and you progress through them. There is one exception, which is if you are a Medicaid provider, there is an additional early, essentially stage 0 for you, which is adopt, implement, or upgrade, in which you receive your first payment for just simply having an EHR and either adopting it, implementing it, or doing an upgrade. Medicare reimbursement. So originally each provider under Medicare was eligible for $44,000. If this is your first year of testing, you would be eligible for $10,000, and that goes down to $4,000 next year. There is still money on the table, and that's what a lot of folks forget, is while you're trying to avoid the penalties, starting in this year, you would get a negative 1% deduction if you haven't adopted meaningful use for this year in 2015 under Medicare, and a negative 2% for the following year. There is still money on the table, and there actually is an interesting clause that is in the final rule that a lot of folks are overlooking, which is if you've already taken the hardship exemption because you weren't able to get your meaningful use attestation under Medicare and by October 1st of this year, so that way you avoided the 1% deduction, you can still receive the $4,000 in meaningful use reimbursement if you do go ahead and do meaningful use stage 1 for the 4th quarter of this year. So a lot of folks are missing that they still have that opportunity to at least get some reimbursement. If you're a Medicaid provider, whenever I'm in a room with different physician groups or hospitals, I always go ahead and remind the Medicaid providers not to raise their hands at this point in the presentation, because Medicaid providers do have it much easier in a lot of ways, at least when it comes to meaningful use. And Medicaid providers can still wait until 2016 to even start the Meaningful Use program and still receive full reimbursement. So there's plenty of breathing room there, and there is not the penalties that there are under Medicare. Meaningful use eligibility is essentially just for doctors, so the different doctors listed there. There is one exception, which is a PA that actually leads a community health center is also eligible. Nurse practitioners are unfortunately never eligible under either the Medicare or Medicaid program. So talking about MU1 versus MU2, we have some really good presentations on both MU1 and MU2 that are recorded on our YouTube or up on our SlideShare. So I'm not going to go through those in a lot of detail. But the big difference between MU1 and MU2 is, of course, the number of measures that you need to go ahead and attest on. The big thing that's kind of hidden in the MU2 measures is while there's 17 core measures instead of 13, many of those core measures actually have an A, B, and C component. And so that 17 is actually a misnomer. If you were to break out all those different components, you'd be up around more 25 different core measures that you actually have to attest for. And just a reminder that you have to attest for every single one of those core measures and pass, or take one of the exceptions as allowed, or you don't get any money. It's a complete pass or fail system. One thing that I'm really going to talk about in detail today is MU1 versus MU1 2013 versus MU1 2014. And this is a very, very important distinction for the final rule. When all of the EHRs were certified for meaningful use, it was originally done under the 2011 certification standards, and those expired as of January 1st of this year. Each year within the 2011 certification standards, there were slight tweaks as CMS tried to perfect and close some of the gaps and loopholes within meaningful use. And so the last year on the 2011 standard, the 2011 certification was the 2013 standards. Starting with the 2014 certification, which every EHR had to go back and get for MU1 as well as MU2, they did go ahead and add patient portal as a core measure. And that's really something we're going to focus on heavily in a future insights. But just be aware that when you're talking about MU1 2014 standards, that you do have patient portal as a core measure, and that's something you should heavily focus on, especially this late in the year. You might want to look at things like auto-enrollment or bulk enrollment, things like that. There are other minor changes. I'm not going to take the time to go through them, but they have to do around vitals and a couple of other areas. But there's a good link there that actually explains the difference in the 2013 versus 2014 meaningful use stage 1 requirements. And again, the penalties, as I mentioned, it's working a little bit odd. Usually we go ahead and CMS looks 2 years into the future for penalties. Programs like PQRS, for example, 2014 is dictating your penalty for 2016. For meaningful use, there's just a 1-year gap, and so 2014 is leading to the 2015 penalty year. So if you don't do any attestation under Medicare, you would get a -1% penalty on all of your Medicare reimbursements for 2015. If you don't do anything in 2015, then you would get a -2%, and that continues at additional 1% each year. There's quite a bit of discussion about how far that goes on and whether or not there's stopgap measures in place. There's a good white paper out on the CMS website that if there isn't sufficient adoption of meaningful use, that the 2% will go up to 3% and then could actually plateau out. We just have to see how that shakes out. But what we do know for sure right now is the -1% is coming if you haven't attested in 2014 and -2% after that. Again, for Medicaid, this does not apply. This is only for Medicare. So this is kind of the infamous grid that is really the crux of what was approved in the final rule. And I'll walk through this grid. It's a bit complex, but then I'll also break it down in a year-by-year explanation. So if you were scheduled to do Meaningful Use Stage 1 in 2014, you have a couple of different options. If you're on a 2011 certified EHR, a lot of folks I know on this call are using NextGen. So if you're using NextGen, it would be a pre-5.8 version. If you're using Epic, it would be a pre-2014 version. And then if you go to the Chapel website, the CHPL website, you can go ahead and look up which versions were certified for 2011 versus 2014 for your different EHR vendors out there. But if you were scheduled to do Stage 1 in 2014, and you are still on a 2011 certified system, you are actually rewarded for slacking a little bit. And I'm just joking when I say that, but it does work out in your favor that you can go ahead and do the 2013 Stage 1 objectives and measures. Now, what's interesting is we've actually confirmed with CMS directly that should you have been on a 2011 certified EHR for a full quarter earlier this year, and you did go ahead and meet your measures, but now you're on a 2014 certified system, you can go back to that previous quarter, let's say Q1, and use that. And a lot of our clients are doing that to avoid the patient portal requirement. So just keep that in mind. You may want to go back and just run the reports and see how you look during that time period, and then decide if you want to do the 2011 or 2014. If you're in this middle column, it means that you were on a half and half during your attestation quarter time period. So you're half and half on 2011 and 2014. I wouldn't even want to try to attest this way, because you're going to have to run the two separately and then add your numerators and denominators together. It's going to be kind of a nightmare. You technically could do it. For the time that you were on the 2011 certified version, you'd be following 2013 standards. And for the time that you're on the 2014 edition, you would be on the 2014 standards. And then if you are on a 2014 certified system, you were supposed to do Stage 1 this year, you just proceed like normal. There's no asterisk after that. So you would go ahead and do the 2014 Stage 1 objectives. Stage 2 is where it gets really interesting. So for Stage 2, if you are on the 2011 certified system, which means you aren't even eligible for doing Stage 2 because your system wouldn't support it, you can actually do the 2013 Stage 1 requirements. And again, you can look back to a previous quarter and go ahead and implement for that quarter if you met the 2013 measures. If you're on the half and half, again, you can go ahead and choose. And then if you are on 2014, you now have the option of doing 2014 Stage 1 or Stage 2 objectives. Now you notice there's asterisks after a bunch of these. What that asterisk means is that you do need to go ahead and attest that you could not fully implement the 2014 certified system. And what's really important to keep in mind is how this is worded. What this does not mean is that you have to ensure that your 2014 system wasn't certified in time, because a lot of EHRs were certified at the end of last year or the early part of this year, which would have theoretically given you plenty of time to go ahead and be on the 2014 system. That's actually not what this is saying at all. What this is saying is due to delays in certification or issues with defects with the products or delays in ancillary products like reports or your HISPs, which is connecting with other providers for secure messaging, an important component of Stage 2. If any of those items were not available on time, for you to realistically be able to implement the changes with your physicians, you do qualify for any of those asterisks. Now, you will need to go ahead and attest to that, but as long as you're able to say that this component wasn't ready in time for us to go ahead and implement, you should be safe there. And this is where CMS has not given a whole lot of guidance. They've purposely left this fairly open, because there's so many different scenarios. This is where we can help give you some individual guidance if you would like on whether or not your individual scenario would meet this requirement. For most EHRs out there, they meet this requirement because of things like defects or delays in the ancillary products. I'll be honest, if you talk to your vendor, you're probably going to get a very different answer, and the reason why is they're worried at the end of the year that CMS is going to publish a report of all the vendors with a count next to them of the number of folks that weren't able to attest in time, and no one wants to be on the top of that list. That being said, it's pretty straightforward to meet these requirements, as most vendors have had a very difficult time implementing the 2014 standards within a short time frame, especially when it comes to meaningful use stage 2. So talking about Medicaid, so just keep in mind, for Medicaid, you have a couple of options in addition to what we talked about. So if you haven't attested at all under Medicaid, you do have until 2016. You can go ahead and do AIU if you haven't done that before for this year. And you also do not have a sequential year requirement. Under Medicare, you must, once you start attesting, you must attest every single year sequentially. You can't skip a year, or if you were to skip 2014, you would be eligible, you would get hit with that 1% deduction, just like everybody whose 2014 is their first year and they haven't attested at all. So it's incredibly important that you never skip a year under Medicare. Under Medicaid, you can go ahead and skip a year. So I say ignore the next several slides because it doesn't really apply to you if you're under a Medicaid provider. If you're a Medicaid provider, you have the option of following what's on one of the next slides, or you can just skip the year if you're not ready to go, and you won't face any penalty as a result. You, of course, won't get the money. If you need the money, you would want to go ahead and follow what's on the next slides. But if you need to opt out, you can go ahead and do so. So making sure that you, this is redundant, but I just want to really drive this point home because I'm going to mention this several times as we go year by year through the next several slides here. So to make sure that you're using the correct MU version, if you are on a 2011 certified system, you must use the 2013 MU1 requirements. And that is pretty self-explanatory because your 2011 certified system isn't going to support the 2014 MU1 requirements anyways. If you're on a 2014 certified system, you must use the 2014 MU1 or MU2 requirements, which means the patient portal is a core measure, and there is no opting out for that. So going year by year, so if 2014 is the first year that you were attesting, you needed to have attested by October 1st, 2014, which means your attestation period would have already had to have started. And you would have to be preparing to actually get your data submitted to Medicare by October 1st, 2014. If not, you will face the penalty in 2015. There were hardship exemptions that were allowed, and those were due on July 1st. There is no recovery period for that, so if you did not get those in by July 1st, you would be really targeting to get that October 1st deadline hit, or letting your budgetary folks know that you are going to get hit with that 1% deduction. Unfortunately, at this point in the year, there's just no way around it. However, also keep in mind, regardless of what happens in 2014, even if you did take the hardship exemption and had it submitted by July 1st, it gets accepted and all that good stuff, you still need to keep an eye out because there's going to be a 2016 hardship exemption. And we do not have yet from CMS what the requirements or the different reasons for not being able to test are going to be for 2016 yet. All that we know is that it is going to become available. If this is your second year of testing, so you attested for the first time in 2013, you must attest for a quarter by the end of the year. There is no opt-out. You must attest for 1 quarter this year, or you will get hit with the 1% deduction. If you're on a 2011 certified system, you can go ahead and use the 2013 requirements. If you're on a 2014 certified system, you have to use the 2014 requirements, which does require the patient portal. Now again, CMS is allowing you to go back and look at a previous quarter when you're still on the 2011 certified system, if that is easier for you to do. Just make sure that you hit all the 2011 measures. I'm sorry, the 2013 measures for when you were on the 2011 certified version. If this is your third or fourth year of testing, you've got several different ways that you could go about this. You do need to, once again, go ahead and attest for a quarter by the end of the year. Again, if you don't do that, you'll get hit with the 1% penalty. but then you've got 3 options from there. You can go back and look at a quarter when you're on a 2011 certified version, and you can go ahead and pull the data and have it meet the MU1 2013 requirements. I have a lot of folks that are going with this top option that would typically be doing stage 2 this year. If you did upgrade and you didn't get a quarter in under the 2011 certified version, then you can go ahead and do the MU1 2014 requirements, which does require a patient portal. Or if you're ready to go, I actually have one client that says, hey, we're ready for stage 2, we're going to go for it. You can, of course, go ahead and do that. So a couple words of caution. So providers that are going to be attesting for their 4th or 5th year in 2015 need to start collecting data for MU2 on the January 1st of next year. And this is something that the blogosphere and the different industry rags out there have really been upset about, is that there wasn't any let up on 2015. They really feel like it's being, to quote one article, being pushed off a cliff to go from 2011 or 2013 or 2014 MU1 to a full year of MU stage 2 in 2015. That is very, very steep and difficult to do. So there are a lot of complaints about that. The one thing that you can keep in mind, though, is the one benefit of attesting for a full year is your providers can miss quite a bit more in the beginning while they're getting up to speed, and then make up for it later on because things get averaged out over the entire year, and so there is quite a bit more breathing room. The reason I included this sarcastic comment, well, unless CMS changes their mind again, is because what we've really seen this year with ICD-10 and now Meaningful Use is we can't even try to predict what CMS is going to do anymore. We can only just prepare with the information that we have today. They are getting, CMS is getting a fair amount of blowback for this, so maybe there will be another proposed rule. There's no writing on the wall to say that's going to happen at this point, so that's just purely hopeful speculation, not even likely speculation. But for right now, if you're sitting where you're going to be in your 4th or 5th year in 2015, get ready. The other word of caution, and this one's going to be really, really messy, is Medicaid providers go ahead and attest through their state portal. And a lot of states, including the state of Florida, I know for certain, are not going to be ready to allow for the variances or the attestation for taking the variances in time to meet the typical end of February attestation as would be planned. So that, in those cases, the states are going to be doing extensions. This happened a lot with the first year of Meaningful Use. And in that case, you just want to get in touch with your state, either go to their website for their attestation portal or contact them directly if they haven't had a time to post anything, and see what sort of time frame they're looking at for that. So if that occurs, of course, that's going to delay your payments. So I would certainly let your financial people know that the Meaningful Use payments that you're expecting because you did everything right are going to be delayed because you simply can't key the data into the state website in time. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Oh, by the way, this is my email address, so feel free, if you don't want to ask the question with everybody on the phone today, to email me directly, and I'd be happy to answer your question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and then answer any questions that you have. Okay, so everybody should be, oh. Okay, everybody should be unmuted. So feel free to call out any questions that you have.
Hi, Ben. This is Tanya Parker. Can you hear me?
Hey, Tanya. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I have a question. So you mentioned that most EHR vendors will meet the requirements for being able to take advantage of the flexibility of not having to report on stage 2, but reporting on stage 1 again. Can you speak specifically to NextGen and maybe give some examples of some of the things that were delayed that would allow providers to take advantage of that? And I'm thinking of things like maybe NextGen Share, because it came out so late, could be a reason why providers could take advantage of the flexibility.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I want to clarify that what I'm saying for NextGen really could be said for all providers. But to talk specifically about NextGen, there's 3 things that you could go ahead and use to support your case. One is EHR Share was delivered very late in the year. It didn't even come out until, I believe, July or August. So trying to get that implemented and the providers in the community on it to be able to meet the MU Stage 2 requirements would have been very, very difficult to do. The second thing is, as late as today, there's still defects in the reports that are in HQM, and NextGen is going in and changing those. It's difficult to get data on the measures that are in HQM. Plus, a lot of the clinical quality measures are missing, and you may need some of those clinical quality measures for your specialty. The last piece is NextGen is actually asking that everybody upgrade to 5.8 UD1 and 8.3.8 to meet the MU Stage 2 requirements. And 8.3.8 has been out for just a matter of weeks at this point. UD1 is out, but has a couple of defects in it, so I wouldn't recommend upgrading to that quite yet. So you don't even have a fully supported version out, and now it's September. So you have a very, very strong case as far as NextGen goes.
Great, that's really helpful. Thanks so much.
Hi, Ben. This is Michelle at Rocky Mountain Eye Center.
Hey, Michelle.
And I wanted to know if we're supposed to report for stage 2 and we report stage 1, does it affect our payments at all?
Absolutely not. You'll still fall into the payment schedule just as planned and get the same amount that you would have.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it, that we're almost being rewarded for not upgrading or not being ready in time. A lot of it's way beyond our capabilities to be able to, a lot of this is outside of our control, but we're actually almost getting rewarded for not being able to do it.
Right, right. Thank you.
What other questions you folks have?
Hey, Ben, this is Don Wilson from Pavilion Services.
Hey, Don.
Can you restate the KBM number? Was it 834?
838.
Oh, 838.
Yeah, and if we want to dive into NextGen a little bit, so 838 is the version that you need to be on to be fully supported by NextGen for MU2. They corrected some significant defects in that, and that's what HQM is going to be pulling off of. There's a couple of options. If you just finished an 8.3 upgrade, asking your providers to go through one is going to be a tough sell. We do have our free MU Lifeboat solution, which we have retrofitted for the 8.3 standards, and you could go ahead and just pull whatever you need off of that. Feel free to contact me if you need it. The other thing is keep in mind, it's not the final version of 8.3. 8.3.10 is going to be, they're skipping 8.3.9. 8.3.10 will be due out by the user group, and there's 5 specialties: ophthalmology, ortho, derm, GI, I remember the last one, that they're doing significant rewrites on. So if you fall into any of those, your providers are going to see the 8.10 content UGM, and they're going to want that anyways.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
This is Tanya again. I just wanted to mention I attended a NextGen webinar yesterday on meaningful use, and the NextGen rep didn't say that 8.3.8 was required, but did say it was optimal. So this is the first I'm hearing that that version is actually required for stage 2.
Yeah, if you submit a ticket saying that there's a defect, the way that comes up is if you submit a ticket that your HQM report's pulling in correctly. So actually click the upgrade to 838.
Okay.
And then the UD1 requirement is due to some fixes with the patient portal.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is Amy. I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Yeah, sure can, Amy.
Okay. I have an ADP Advanced as our EHR software, and I know they were 2011 certified because we did Meaningful Use in 2012, and then 13. This would be our stage 2 year. So I'm not sure if they're 13. Like you said, a lot of them don't give you all the info when you call. So I'm going to look on that website that you said, the CHPL site, but even that's kind of hard to figure out 100% if they're certified. So do you know anything about that program?
I don't know that one off the top of my head. Can you drop me a quick email, and then I'll go ahead and
help me out with
pull
that.
it off the Chapel site?
If they are
I'd be happy to.
2014, does that mean they're no longer 2011? And so then I'd have to go by the 14 Meaningful Use Stage 1?
Are they SaaS where they're actually doing the upgrades for you?
They are doing it for us.
Okay, then it would be based on when they went ahead and moved you to the 2014 edition.
Okay. I see. If they
and then you
through the year or something.
Okay, then yeah, you would be forced on to the 2014 Stage 1 requirements with the patient portal requirement.
Okay, and again, I'm guessing. I don't know if they've moved us officially. I don't think they're 100% ready for Stage 2, but that doesn't mean they're not certified, right?
Right. So the 2014 MU1 and 2014 MU2 requirements are separate.
Okay.
So I can go ahead and, when I look up the ADP certification on the Chapel website, it'll say right there what the version number is. We can just compare that to what's in your system, and that'll let us know.
Okay, great. I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and post this up on YouTube and put the slides on SlideShare. It'll be a day or two before they're up there. In the meantime, please feel free to just send me an email if you have any questions. It's, again, really hard to generalize, and I'm happy to make any specific recommendations based on your scenario. The other thing I forgot to mention that's very difficult about generalizing is this is by the individual provider. Remember, you're testing by the provider's MPI, and it's not based on your tax ID. And so we're getting more and more health systems or provider groups out there that have providers that have come in at different stages. Follows the provider when they move into your system. So you could have some that are Stage 1 and some that are Stage 2. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your providers and where they're at. For next week's Insights, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We actually took our top 10 EHR ancillary providers out there. So different vendors out there that have really cool tools that you may not be aware of that have just made implementing EHRs and supporting them that much easier. And we just wanted to share what we've learned from those guys with you. There may be some good stuff in there that you want to go ahead and steal. We don't get paid by showcasing these guys or anything like that, so it's purely just off of what we've seen work really well. So that'll be for next Wednesday at the same time. Thank you, everybody.